All right, let me call us to order and appreciate everybody being here. Ask you to please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you and God bless. And we're here today to talk about city fees. First up, a kind of update on current city fees and where we stand, and then we'll talk about any additional fees that anybody's got in mind. So, Amy, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So just a quick update on where we are with our current city fees. We had talked about that we're going to reach out to some of our departments and get started on looking at the fees, some of which we could do in 2023, depending on how quickly we can get those set, or the others would come through in the 2024 budgets. So the ones we're currently looking at are the motor coach permits, tourism ticket fees, carriage medallion fee, and tour guide study notes. We've established work groups for building inspection permits, engineering permits, garbage cart fees, special event fees, and recreation facility fees. And then we also plan to work on fire permits, stormwater permits, and certificate of public conveyance. So those are all the ones we're currently working on or plan to work on in 2023. Any questions on that?
So, could I just suggest a concept? Because it seems like in many cases we have fees in place, and then we don't review them for some period of time, and then we get behind. That we kind of build into all these fees some kind of fail-safe inflation factor. I don't know that they get adjusted every year, but say once cumulative inflation has reached 5% or 10%, that we kind of have an automatic update of the fees. So at least we're keeping up with inflation. Not that you need to adjust it every single year if there's a 2% increase in inflation, but once it gets to 5%, or some market level that we kind of expect that we're going to have build in that we're going to have an increase. Anyway, that's just a thought to keep up with.
That's one of the policies that we're working on, Mayor, as well.
Okay. Councilmember Seekings.
It seems to me, so long as this committee continues to exist, we should just put it on our agenda every year to have a session or half a session on fees so we can review them and make recommendations.
Well, you could, that's one way to do it too. But we have a lot of different fees, as you can see. And anyway, I've seen too many cases in the last 7 years where we're adjusting things that hadn't been adjusted in 20 years, and an automatic thing wouldn't be bad. Anyway, that's my thought.
That's one of the policies. Like I said, we're working on a policy for that.
Okay.
That we're updating and looking at them on a more timely basis.
Great.
Any other questions? Sorry, Mayor. Okay. So
Amy, I do have one really quick question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So motor coach permits, and what do we charge a motor coach to tool around downtown Charleston and knock all our trees down?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have the answer to that question unless.
All right. Well, I just think it's a really great idea to look at all of them, because I suspect, as the mayor pointed out, there's some that we haven't visited or revisited in a long time.
We had sent out, and maybe I didn't send it the last meeting, we had a listing of all the fees that we have currently. I just don't remember what it is, but I can make sure I send that to you, Councilmember Seekins, so you have it.
I'll take a look. That's fine. Especially like tourism fees and motor coach permits.
Mm-hmm.
We should charge them a substantial amount. It's a heavy burden on the city, and it's a privilege for them to be here. And that's a place that we can raise some revenue off of tourism that we can't otherwise do in other places.
Okay, so one of my secret fairies just actually gave me the answer, which is $14 per tour.
Well, that for a motor coach, for like a big
Mhm.
old motor coach?
Yes.
Wow. That should be $14 per head, not $14 per
Yeah.
tour.
So that's obviously one of the ones we're looking at.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Councilmember Shade, then Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy, along those same lines, and I got on a little bit late with my audio problems. But if you got a fee schedule, is it possible as you go through that schedule to look at the last time any of those fees were adjusted? Is that?
Yeah, that's on the list, on that list. I said, I'll resend it out again so you'll have it. It'll tell you exactly the last time that we looked at the fees were adjusted and what the fee is. But I'll send it back out to everybody after the meeting.
And is there any kind of comparison that we have with other municipalities on these types of fees? I mean, it would have to be unique, I think, to a city like Charleston or Savannah or Asheville, who has these kind of motor coach or tourist ticket fees or carriage medallion fees.
So while we're working through trying to come up with a new fee and what it should be, we often will consult with other municipalities to see what they're doing. So that would be all part of the process of updating the fee. And when we have all that information, Councilmember Shea, we can share it as we go.
Okay.
As we work through each of these fees, we'll obviously bring them back to all of you with the recommendation of what the new fee would be and how we came up with it. So you'll know the methodology.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to sort of piggyback on the exchange with Councilman Seekings and Amy just a minute ago, you know, for years and decades, it used to be that we had to set fees according to a very prescriptive requirement in the state code that said that the amount of the fee we charge has to be directly pegged to the benefit received by the payor. That is no longer the rule in South Carolina. There's much more flexibility we have, and that relates not just to these new fees we're going to talk about, hopefully on this call, but things like these, motor coach fees that we're talking about. You know, we don't have to come up with some explanation as to what that $14 is going for.
Mhm.
That's gone. It's gone. And I know that that's been the way we've done business around here for years. And it's good that we've done business like that around here for years, because that's what the rules were. So it is a philosophical change that we need to get comfortable with as to how all these fees work, how they're set, what the money can be used for. And it doesn't apply just to these new revenue sources we're going to talk about, but all of the existing user fees that we have are subject to this new requirement. So we could charge $100 for that coach fee. I mean, it's just different now. We don't have to go through this painstaking analysis to show the amount of staff time that it requires to, we don't have to do that anymore. So just wanted to flag that as we sort of roll through this meeting today.
The blinders are off. And I'm not sure why, but I was informed the other day that for some reason, for years, the software we used or something like that, we'd never been able to get the motor coach fees to be payable online. And we've finally done that. So you can now pay your motor coach fee online.
Yep, we're trying to move forward
Yes.
with technology. Okay, any other questions on the current fees?
Just one more quick question. When we look at these fees, I'd be interested to know sort of for each one of these categories, what we currently generate gross, and then sort of figure it out from there. The one that's really got me fascinated is motor coach permit fee. I just would love to know how much we collect from that and sort of what that looks like. Thanks.
Okay, we can do that. I don't think it's a big ticket item overall, but we'll figure out what it is.
Okay, so I don't know that you necessarily want to do this, but as Councilmember Appel has talked about the law, so we've kind of put the law, I put in slides the law and highlighted the changes to it. So you could see really where the changes lie within the law. If you want me to go through those, we can, or we can skip by them, up to you.
Please go through them. Thanks.
Okay, so like I said, I kind of italicized and highlighted the new parts of the law that Councilmember Pett was talking about, which is, like he said, even if the general public also benefits, whereas before it was used to the benefit of the payers, they've added that language in there, even if the general public also benefits. Only be used for the specific improvement contemplated, not to exceed the cost of the improvement. So Councilmember Pell, that's kind of what we do. We just make sure that we're always staying within and we're not necessarily making a profit. That's how we've always operated in the past, which I think is how we still have to operate based on this, and then be uniformly imposed on all payers. And then they've added some language as well. So public notice of any new service or user fee is required, and public comment must be received prior to the final adoption of any new service or user fee. Revenue derived from the service or user fee imposed to finance the provision of public services must be used to pay costs related to the provision of the service or program for which the fee was paid. And then if the revenue generated by a fee is 5% or more of the prior fiscal year's total budget, the proceeds of the fee must be kept in a separate and segregated fund from the general fund. And just for knowledge, 5% of our 2022's budget would be $11.1 million. So if the fee were higher than that, then we would have to follow that bullet point. And then a local body that imposes a user or service fee must publish the amount of dollars annually collected on each fee on the county's website, which is a little weird to me, but anyway. And that was really just what I wanted. Any questions or comments on that? We just took that from the state law.
Hey, Amy, it's Rick. And going back to Councilman Seeking's comments about the motor coach fee. If you increase that fee under this, you could probably use some of the proceeds of that fee to improve city-owned roads.
Possibly.
Okay, I mean, it seems the way this is written that, I mean, certainly the service that provides certainly impacts our roads.
The motor coaches driving
Yeah.
over the road, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there's flexibility in the law in terms of how you define specific improvement contemplated. And that's the issue. And I want to be clear, Act 236, which is what Amy just read, that this is Act 236. You've heard me talk about it. We've just seen it on the screen now. It doesn't mean that there's no rules for user fees. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that user fees now can be structured in such a manner where there's incidental benefit to non-payors. And that's a big deal. That's a big difference, because that for so long is what's been one of the distinguishing factors between a fee and a tax, right? We all pay our federal income taxes. That money could go to an F-16, it could go to a public park, it could go to a Medicare. We have no say of where that tax money goes. But when you pay a fee, there has to be some direct benefit that inures to the payor. That line has been blurred by Act 236. And so also under the user fee statutes, unlike taxes where we're specifically preempted by the state from coming up with any new taxes that are not specifically identified, there's no such preemption language when it comes to user fees. That's why we can come up with things like coach fees. There's nothing about coach fees in the South Carolina Code of Laws. These are things where there's some home rule flexibility to create fee programs for government services and programs that are being implemented on the local level. So I think a lot of this comes down to how these fee programs are shaped, how system improvements are quantified and how they relate to the fee. And I think Rick raised a great point. I mean, there is a nexus between the use of the roads and the maintenance of the roads. I mean, I think that's something that can be defended. We talked a lot at the end of last year about the importance of revenue streams to the city. Every year I've been on council, we've had to debate millage increases. This is a very important topic for us to be contending with. This is a topic that provides us with an opportunity to diversify our revenue streams in a multitude of ways across a multitude of different domains to help shore up the city's budget, alleviate pressure on taxpayers through millage increases, and provide better public services and infrastructure to our constituents. I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge deal. And there's a lot of different new fees we can talk about. I don't know how y'all want to go about doing that today, but this is certainly something I think we ought to talk about.
Okay, who's got a new fee they want to talk about?
So that's where I was just leaving an open discussion. I know there's a couple of council members, Councilmember Pell, that had some thoughts about some fees. So I didn't know.
I see Councilmember Gregory's hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question for Councilman Appel. You said the law is blurred. I think that's the term you use.
Yes.
And that then leaves it up to interpretation.
Well, it's not so much that I think the law is blurred. I think that the legal distinction and definition between a fee and a tax has been blurred by this legislation. And just by way of some background, if y'all don't mind, I'll sort of run through the history of this legislation just real quick, just to give us all a clear sense of how we got here, because I think it illustrates this blurring issue that Councilman Gregory just talked about. So counties throughout the state of South Carolina had been charging these road maintenance fees, flat charges on every vehicle licensed in their respective county. That money was then going to pave roads and do road improvement projects around the county. That fee was challenged in Greenville County. The Supreme Court a couple years ago struck that fee down because it violated the old version of 6-1-306. And the court said that it was a fee functioning like a tax because there were benefits going to people that didn't pay the fee. So if you use this road fee money to improve roads, if you were just traveling through the county, if you were visiting, if you didn't have a car registered in that county, you were getting a benefit that a fee payor had paid for. And so the Supreme Court struck down those fees. Road maintenance fees were illegal in South Carolina, as determined by the Burns decision in Greenville. The legislature responded with Act 236. What Act 236 does is it overturns the Burns decision by liberalizing the benefit prong of the user fee statute. So when I say that the legislation blurs the line between fees and taxes, this legislation now makes legal a fee that the Supreme Court originally viewed as an unlawful tax. So I know it's a little
It's a little blurry, yes.
It's a little blurry, but fees used to have to live in a very tight box in South Carolina, and local governments around the state were stretching it. They were pushing their luck. These counties didn't want to raise taxes for political reasons, so they ended up, nickel and diming with these fees, right? But they were using the money for the same purpose is what you would use tax dollars for these like, broad-based public, improvement projects, things like that. The legislature changed the rules in light of the Burns decision, and now that's the world we get to operate in. This legislation inures to our benefit.
I clearly understand, everything that you're saying. But is there potential, however, because of this blurriness, that we may have to go to the Supreme Court at some point?
Well, anybody can challenge anything legally. What I would say though is that if we're talking about new fees, there are certain ideas of fees that I think are clearly, perhaps indisputably legal. And then I think that the more creative you get, the more innovative you get, you start to move that sliding scale over a little bit as you're going into the frontier. So for what I mean by that, the city of Charleston can 100% charge a road maintenance fee. There's no lawyer that could ever convince me that that's not legal because of the Burns decision. Burns involved a road maintenance fee. It was struck down. The legislature passed a law that essentially reverses the Burns decision. And I can tell you that that is exactly what this legislation was designed to do. So that would not be going to the Supreme Court, in my opinion.
No, I'm talking not just with regard to the Burns decision. I mean, because that was pretty specific. I'm just talking about making sure that your argument is something that our corporation counsel agrees with. I guess that's where my head is on this.
All right, we can ask them, but is Julia here? And then I'll come to Councilmember Shade.
I'm on, Mayor. I would prefer not to give any legal opinions in an open session, however.
Okay, Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilman Appel, I love you. You're a great guy, but you got to quit putting on your legal lawyer hat. And in these sessions, we've got corporation counsel on this, and we got to take advice from our corporation counsel on this. I mean, I appreciate your input on all this, and you know all this, but we sit. I'm a lawyer. Councilmember Seekins is a lawyer. Councilmember Bowden's a lawyer. You're a lawyer. We've got our legal counsel who's supposed to give us advice on this stuff. I mean, in all due respect, I've said this before, but I think we've got to make sure we separate ourselves from our legal profession to this. So this sometimes confuses the issue, and I don't mean that in a critical manner because you're one of the brightest guys I know, and I respect you. You know I do, but I think we've got to take a step back as council representatives to be careful that we don't walk outside of our lanes on who we are. I mean, it really is important what you're telling us, but as Julia just said, we can't be talking about legal issues and legal advice in open session like this.
Let's go into executive session. I asked for this to be on an executive session item.
And I'm pleased to understand. I'm not trying to be critical at all.
Sure, I got you.
Yeah, we're going to be careful about how we go into this sort of stuff when we start talking about legal issues and things of that nature, and we've got to defer to our lawyers at this point on doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Julia, would you be prepared to discuss this if we were to take the time now to go into an executive session?
Sure, we can go back there and talk through this if you'd like.
Okay. Were there any other aspects of this discussion about additional fees that anyone had to suggest or asked about? Councilmember Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to know if, I know it's relatively new, but have we taken a survey to see what some other cities, municipalities in the state have maybe administered or instituted from a fee standpoint since this act has passed? I was talking to somebody recently, and they were telling me Hilton Head is doing something down there. That, I'm just wondering, and that's not, I guess, to be answered today, but I think it would be pretty good if we could see. I'm sure there's some people that's already out the gate on some of these things, fees and what they're for,
Right.
that kind of thing. But anyway, that is more of a broad question. Maybe you get some answers to report back, later.
Yeah, we can ask the municipal association that. And I know we all have things that we think we could fund a little better in the city. The two things that occur to me most readily are affordable housing and to set up a dedicated fee that's appropriate somewhere to where we could have a reliable source of funding for that. Of course, we've set up a number of little different things like fee and lieu fees and all, but something sustainable would be worthy of discussion. And also regarding roadway improvements, because this has come up recently, and I think I pointed out to y'all at the last council meeting that we're estimating we're knocking on the door of 50% of the streets in our city are actually city streets as opposed to DOT streets. And like it or not, we got long-term liability to take care of those streets, and we don't have a dedicated funding source to do that. So, I'm interested in having a discussion about that Burns case and whatever fee they have up in Greenville County. Is that something we want to consider for the city of Charleston so that we have some means when the need comes along, like Councilmember Saccharin's request to do those intersection improvements up on Rutledge Avenue, and we all agree, gee, that's a great idea. But all we basically could say was, well, gee, let's look for the money for it. We don't have any kind of regular fee for transportation related expenses that we could rely upon to do those kinds of things when we need them, when our citizens need them, and provide more safety for them. So anyway, if that might be a jumping off point for us to go into executive session, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to go into executive session to receive legal advice on Act 236.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Just one last piece, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
You said fee structure. If you remember, there was a proposal. I think you had maybe Senator Kempson introduced adding a fee to our building permit for affordable housing, a 3% fee. Even though it's the city of Charleston building permit fee, we had to get permission from the state, remember? And I think it died in committee. I'm just wondering what's the life of that right now. And we can talk that on the other side. But anyway.
Gotcha. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Can someone create a breakout room for us for a little bit?
So Patrick, the ones that would need to be in that is obviously all the council members, myself, Matt Froelich, Kathy Mercer, Andrew Jones, and Julia. And Robbie Somerville is too.
And you don't want me, Amy?
And Rick Giroux, sorry. And Rick Giroux. Sorry about that, Rick.
I thought you weren't showing me love anymore.
I'm sorry. You were up with all the council members, so that's why I missed you. And on my screen anyway, in my boxes, my Hollywood squares.
Amy, what's the code section again?